What's up everybody, NFX here with another tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to talk about bass lines. I'm going to talk about how to make a simple but effective bass line. I'm not going to talk about how to make a bass line in any specific genre or style. There are just too many styles out there. Rules for the styles are so diverse that I don't really feel that I can competently describe them all to you. And what I mean by the different styles, for example, you have jazz bass lines, you have blues, you have rock, you have funk, you have, all these. For every style of music, there's usually a style of bass that goes with it, reggae, whatever. So I'm not going to talk about those specifically because really those are styles that you can listen to songs from there and kind of hear what's going on with them. But what I want to talk about is the importance of a bass line and kind of what role it occupies in music. The first thing I want to do is talk about what a bass line, the importance of a bass line from the musical perspective. And that role that it plays is to occupy a lower register. When I'm talking about a register, I'm talking about kind of a frequency range. On the screen you see a parametric equalizer, and each one of these bands represents a place in the frequency scale. And it goes from low on this end to high on this end. Low instruments, like the bass, occur down here. And there are very few instruments that occur down here. There are some orchestral type instruments that happen down here. A cello's kind of down in this area. I think there's actually a bass instrument in an orchestra that occurs down here. But, your choices for lower register instruments are pretty slim. And so that's why bass is very important, because it occupies this area down here. And your guitars and your vocals might be here, maybe here. Your flutes and your higher violins and stuff are going to occur in these upper areas. And any good song is probably going to have some things all across the spectrum. Because if you had a song where everything was low or everything was middle or everything was high, it wouldn't sound too good. So you generally want to try to have a mixture of the various frequency ranges represented in a song. And that's the role of the bass line, is to fulfill the lower part of that register. Now, in a drum pattern, that's not even talking about drums. So if we look at the drums, in the drums it's kind of the same way. You've got your lower end handled by the kick, your middle handled by the snare, and your higher end handled by the hi-hat. So again, it's like a good drum pattern also will fill across the registers. Now the bass has a really important role because it also helps to glue the drum part with the musical part. And the reason it does that is because it's often played along with the kick drum. So it's played in a rhythmic way, or it's played in a way that's within the groove. So it helps to establish that link between music and percussion in a song. So to me, the way I see it, like in my brain, is it's kind of like a glue. It just takes two parts, and without that part in the middle to hold everything together, it wouldn't sound as nice. And again, that's just my term and my opinion on that. Sometimes a bass line is the song. I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not really that common. But if we think of a song like Super Freak, for example, it goes dun 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 dun. That is the bass line. That is the song. Without that part in it, you wouldn't have quite the same thing. All right, so let's talk about what a bass line needs to do to be effective. And it's really simple. There's really two things a bass line needs to do to be effective. It needs to follow the chord progression, or it needs to be in the scale that you're playing. Some songs don't have a chord progression. You know, that's just the way it goes. And by progression, I mean it plays in a scale, but there's no movement to the chords. It's just the same chord over and over again. In this particular song that I have on the screen, I do have a chord progression. But chord progressions are always, now I hate to say always, but generally they're always done within a specific scale. So if you were like playing, in this case I have my song in the A minor scale, all of my chords are built off notes within the A minor scale. Because your chords are built off all the notes in the scale, they sound consistent, and usually can sound a lot better than if they were just going all over the place. If you don't know your scales and your chord progressions, you should probably want to learn that. I do have a tutorial on scales out right now on my site. I don't have one on chords or chord progressions yet, but I do plan to do those. So by the time you're listening to this, they might be done already, and you might want to go check it out. But the easiest thing to do for a bass line is to follow your chord progression. In this particular song, like I said, I do have a chord progression going on. If we go into here, we're going to take a look at it, and we can see the chords. This is the guitar part here, and it's just basically playing an A minor. I think it's an E minor, and then a couple of D minor chords in it. But if I wanted to, and let me just play this pattern so you can hear what it sounds like. Okay, so that's the basic progression that's going on. Now, the absolute simplest way of making a bass line is to make your bass line follow the root note of your chords. In this case, I know this is an A, so I'll just draw an A in my bass line. And then this one happens to be an E, and these two are Ds. So I'm just going to draw those in. Now let's just listen to what it sounds like with these bass notes hitting. Okay, it doesn't sound, too bad because everything's still in tune. And in case you're wondering why did I put the note here instead of down here, this chord is an inverted chord, which, again, go look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about, or look for my tutorial on chords when it comes out. But I can tell you this is definitely an A minor, so that's why I put A here, because that's the root of my chord. So anyway, so now you can hear I've got this basic 4-note bass line playing along with my my chord progression. Now from here, this is it. This is the most simple way of making a bass line, and it does bring a lot to the table just by doing something that simple, because it does fulfill its role. But you might want to make it a little bit jazzier, or do something with it, and in that case you can you might want to pick a different note that's in the scale. Like I might want to go this way, so instead of doing the root note on the second part, I'll put in this G and then let it play, and you'll hear that it's going to still sound like it belongs. Okay, let's just recap. Stay within your scale and follow your chord progressions. And that's the simplest rule I can tell you to making a bass line. Now, you might want to make a bass line more interesting, and in that case, yeah, do that. And one of the ways you can do that is to follow your kick. Now, I have this one, it's already done. It's basically using the same notes you just saw. The only difference is I've shifted them over. In the previous version, this note was over here, and these notes were over here. So let's just hear what it sounds like with the music. Doesn't sound bad at all. Now let me shift this over, and even though it seems like I'm just shifting these guys over, I happen to know, because I wrote the song, that there are kicks that hit at these locations as well. And when your bass notes hit with a kick note, they tend to have a stronger and tighter feel to the song. So now I've shifted these guys over, and let's take a listen. So just by shifting these over, it makes it a little bit different, and different enough to where the ear is expecting it to be early and it plays a little bit later. So it gives it a different groove to the song, and that's kind of what I was going for. Now, when I wrote this bass line, I played it. I didn't think of it in terms of, oh, gee, let me just pause and play it a little bit late. I didn't think of it that way. I just played it how I felt it. That's one reason why I think it's important for those of you who don't have a MIDI keyboard to get one and start learning some of this, because a lot of times you're going to get a lot better results when you can just kind of play what you're feeling, as opposed to having to overthink what you're supposed to do. So anyway, so there's my basic bass line now. It goes along with the song just fine. But you might want to do a little bit more to it. You might want to add some variation or some accents or something else to it to spice it up a little bit. One thing that is kind of a very common thing to do is in a bass line is to take your root note, let's say in this case it's this A, and go 2 steps down, 1, 2, which happens to be a G, and then using that G lead back into the A. So if I was playing this pattern, I might put a G note here to lead back in. Now let's listen to how this sounds. So you can hear that coming back around into the A fits. So it's pretty common thing that's done in bass lines is when you're about to come back to the beginning, go 2 steps down from your note, in your root note in this case, this A, I go 1, 2, and then I can use that so I can be like, then I can go to get me back to the A, bum, bum, and I'm there. You don't need to do that, but it's done. It's done quite often. And another thing you might want to do is use ghost notes. Now, if I put these back to kind of their standard locations, I'll show you what I mean by a ghost note. You can put a short note in here and lower the velocity a little bit, and what you're going to get is something that plays more along the lines of something like this. Like that. Because this little ghost hit is going to kind of remind you what key you're in before it switches down to that G. And then here we're going to put another one there, and then here we might put another one there, and then let's just take a listen. So you can see these little ghost notes help to kind of just keep the groove moving. In this song I didn't feel I needed them because I had some other things happening that didn't require it. So I'm going to move these back to their original locations. The ghost notes wouldn't fit necessarily in the way I had them before because the timing is different. But I just wanted to let you know about those ghost notes. The other thing you might want to do is make a fill to accentuate the end of a 4-bar phrase, for example. And here's what you're actually looking at a fill. If I go back real quick, you can see that these notes aren't going to change, but these notes over here, I'm going to change them up and make something that looks pretty radically different. And what that is just that's just playing basically a run or a fill to make it more interesting before the pattern repeats. And if I play this pattern by itself, you'll hear how it sounds. Okay, and making fills is really easy if you remember, again, a couple of rules. One, make sure you're in your scale. If you're not in your scale, it's not going to sound good. That's number one. Number two, probably the easiest way to make a fill is just to walk up and maybe down the scale itself. So here, I know I was in my D chord, my D minor chord, so I just started building up from there, and I just went up notes in the scale, and then when I got to a certain point, I came down so that my last note would be just before my A coming back down. It wouldn't sound quite the same if this was an A, so I just made it right there, and then when it leads back into the A, it kind of sounds like it's naturally looping back into a note that belongs in that particular run or fill. So that's an easy way of doing it. But you can do a lot of things. You can do octave jumps, like you might have, let's say, this A here, and I might jump up an octave up here, and then maybe back down. So it might sound like this. Okay, and if you play it actually faster, it might actually sound a little bit better. Let's just take a listen. Yeah, so that's just like an octave jump. You're just jumping up an octave and back down again. That's kind of a common trick that's done with bass. And I don't want to say it's a trick, it's a technique. Let's just say that. So there I've shown you ghost notes, octave jumps. I've shown you how to do a fill. And now let's kind of just take a listen to see how the bass fits in with the song all together, as kind of just a final reminder of what a bass line can do for your song. So there you have it. Obviously this was not a very complicated bass line. The fill may have sounded a little bit complicated, but I told you the basic rules there, and you could see that it wasn't difficult. Hopefully it wasn't difficult for you to understand what I was talking about. But let me just recap. The bass line is kind of the glue that holds a song together. Without a bass line, to me, a song oftentimes sounds empty. If you have a busy bass line, try not to have a busy melody going on elsewhere in the song. While bass lines tend to be simple, they can establish the whole song, a la Super Freak. Bass lines' important role is to fulfill that lower register and glue the drums to the rest of to the musical part of the song. And the most important thing about bass lines probably is know your scale, number one. Know what scale you're in so you know what notes are going to sound good. And number two, follow your chord progression if you have one. If you do those two things, you're going to have a pretty effective bass line. Then from there you can add to it. You can really get fancy. You can add, the octave bumps. You can do the fills. You can do ghost notes. You can do a lot of other things to make the bass more interesting if you think it needs it. And that's really up to you. A lot of times what'll happen if you start off with a very basic bass line that follows your song, you can be grooving along to your song, and in your brain you're hearing, oh damn, there I could have just did this with the bass. I could have just added an extra note there, or I could have done a fill here, I could have dropped it out right there. You'll kind of start to hear things in your head once you get things established and moving in a song. So hopefully you'll be able to not think that bass lines are some mysterious thing. There's no magic to it. It's really easy, and you start with what I've shown you here, and the world is yours because you can grow off of that as far as you want to go. So until the next tutorial, this is NFX signing out.